Daddy, why does Aunty Rose sleep in your room when you travel? The knife slipped from my hand and clattered against the cutting board. I turned slowly, forcing my face into something that hopefully looked normal. What do you mean? Look, I'm not saying I'm a gourmet chef or anything, but I can handle bell peppers without causing a domestic incident. That's supposed to be the bare minimum for a 34-year-old man who owns a house and pays taxes semi-regularly, right? I mean, I've been cutting vegetables since college when ramen got boring, and I discovered that adding actual food to meals was a revolutionary concept. So there I was, standing in my kitchen on a perfectly ordinary Tuesday afternoon, wielding my trusty chef's knife like some kind of suburban warrior preparing lunch, when my 7-year-old son decided to detonate a nuclear bomb disguised as an innocent question. Daddy, why does Aunty Rose sleep in your room when you travel? The knife slipped from my hand and clattered against the cutting board with a sound that seemed way too loud for a piece of metal hitting wood. I'm talking action movie dramatic loud, like the universe decided this moment needed its own sound effect. My heart did this weird lurching thing that felt less like romantic butterflies and more like someone had just told me my tax return was being audited by a particularly vindictive IRS agent with a personal grudge. I turned slowly, probably looking like a malfunctioning robot trying to compute an impossible equation, and forced my face into something that I desperately hoped resembled normal human expression. You know that look you practice in the mirror when you're trying to seem casual about something absolutely not casual? Yeah, that one. I'm pretty sure I failed spectacularly, but 7-year-olds are remarkably bad at reading subtle facial cues, thank God. Let me back up and introduce myself properly, since we're apparently going on this journey together. I'm Jonah Reyes, management consultant by day, apparently clueless husband by, also day, I guess. I've got a nice house in a neighborhood where people actually wave at each other and pretend to care about HOA meetings. I drive a sensible sedan that gets good gas mileage because I'm responsible like that. I pay my mortgage on time. I remember to take out the trash most weeks, and until approximately 45 seconds ago, I thought I had a pretty decent handle on my life. My son Max, the tiny human currently swinging his legs from the kitchen counter stool like he hasn't just dropped the conversational equivalent of a hand grenade into my afternoon, was wearing his favorite dinosaur shirt and had a milk mustache from the cereal he'd been demolishing. He looked at me with those big brown eyes that make me want to buy him whatever toy he points at in Target, completely oblivious to the fact that he'd just shattered my entire worldview with the casual brutality that only children can manage. Max sees me like I'm some kind of superhero who can fix broken toys and make the best grilled cheese sandwiches in the continental United States. To him, I'm the guy who invented bedtime stories and knows exactly how to make the swooshing sounds when we play with his toy airplanes. I'm supposed to have answers. I'm supposed to know things. I'm supposed to be the adult in this scenario. Aunt Rose. He's talking about Aunt Rose, my sister-in-law, who shows up to family dinners with homemade cupcakes that actually taste good and not like cardboard pretending to be dessert. Rose, who teaches yoga and has one of those Instagram accounts where everything looks filtered through some kind of wellness guru lens. Rose, who smiles like she's perpetually starring in a commercial for expensive perfume or organic tea or whatever rich people sell to other rich people. Rose, who wears flowy clothes and talks about chakras and brings my wife Claire fancy wine that I can't pronounce. That Aunt Rose. Sleeping in my room? When I travel, my brain started doing that thing where it tries to process information, but instead just plays that loading circle animation that means your computer is about to crash. I've been traveling for work for years, 4 times a month sometimes, hitting various cities to tell companies how to be more efficient while I expense mediocre hotel breakfasts. Claire always waves goodbye from the porch like we're in some kind of wholesome family sitcom. I kiss her. I kiss Max, I grab my rolling suitcase that's seen better days, and I drive to the airport feeling like a responsible provider doing responsible provider things. And Aunt Rose sleeps in my room? I needed to say something. Max was still looking at me, waiting for an answer with the patience of a kid who's used to adults taking forever to respond to simple questions. My mouth felt like I'd been chewing cotton balls, but I managed to force out something that I hoped sounded light and casual, instead of like a man experiencing a full-blown existential crisis in his own kitchen. Maybe she likes my pajama socks, buddy, I said, reaching for humor like a drowning man reaches for a life preserver. I even added a little laugh that sounded fake to my own ears. Max shrugged, actually shrugged, like this was the most reasonable explanation in the world, and went back to his cereal. Crisis averted in his mind. He'd asked, he'd gotten an answer, and now he could return to the important business of seeing if he could fit 3 Cheerios on his spoon at once. But me? The smile plastered on my face felt like a mask made of plastic wrap, stretched too tight, and about to tear. The elastic band holding it in place was already snapping, and I could feel cracks forming in the facade I'd apparently been maintaining without even realizing it. I stood there, bell peppers abandoned, knife lying on the cutting board like evidence at a crime scene, and something cold settled into my stomach. Not the sexy butterflies you get when your crush texts you back. Not even the nervous flutter before a big presentation. This was different. This was the kind of sick, sinking feeling you get when you're watching a horror movie and the protagonist is about to open the door that obviously has something terrible behind it. And you want to scream at them to stop, but you can't because you're not actually in the movie. Except I was in the movie. I was the protagonist. And I was about to open that door whether I wanted to or not. That night, after Max was tucked into bed with his stuffed dinosaur and his nightlight casting shadows that suddenly looked more ominous than comforting, I lay in my own bed and started replaying memories like some kind of masochistic film student analyzing footage for hidden meanings. I thought about family dinners where Rose and I laughed about nothing, stupid jokes, funny stories, the kind of casual banter you have with relatives you're comfortable around. I remembered Claire's casual goodbyes before my trips, how she'd remind me about meetings and tell me to text when I landed, normal married couple stuff that seemed sweet and considerate. I remembered favors. So many favors. Rose offering to help with Max when the nanny was sick. Rose bringing over dinner when Claire said she had a headache. Rose having a key to our house for emergencies. Rose knowing where we kept everything, comfortable in our space in a way that suddenly didn't feel quite right. 1,000 tiny moments that I'd filed away as nice sister-in-law being helpful started rearranging themselves into a different picture entirely, like one of those optical illusions where suddenly you can't see it the old way anymore. I didn't leave town that week. I told Claire I had a big meeting, which was true, technically, though I invented the urgency, and I left early in the morning with my suitcase like always. Normal routine, normal goodbye kiss, normal wave from the porch. But I didn't get on any plane. Instead, I drove to a coffee shop across town and sat there with my laptop, pretending to work while my mind raced through possibilities I didn't want to consider. Because here's the thing about denial. It's comfortable. It's safe. It's easier than facing the possibility that maybe, just maybe, your 7-year-old son just accidentally revealed that your entire life is built on a foundation made of lies and betrayal. And maybe, just maybe, those pajama socks excuse wasn't going to cut it for much longer. So here's something they don't tell you in marriage counseling or those self-help books with sunset covers that promise to fix your relationship in 30 days or less. There's no handbook for what to do when your kid accidentally implies your wife might be cheating on you with her own sister. I checked. I actually Googled it at 3 in the morning while lying next to Claire, who was sleeping peacefully like someone without a guilty conscience, and all I found were Reddit threads that made me feel simultaneously better and infinitely worse about my situation. What I did find, however, was a sporting goods store that sold binoculars. And let me tell you, walking into a place that smells like rubber and testosterone to purchase surveillance equipment makes you feel like you're auditioning for a really depressing spy movie. You know, the kind where the protagonist isn't James Bond saving the world, but more like some sad suburban dad whose life is falling apart while he pretends to understand how zoom lenses work. The teenage employee with acne and too much enthusiasm asked if I was going birdwatching. I almost laughed in his face. Yeah, kid, I wanted to say. I'm hunting for a rare species called the lying spouse. Very elusive. Tends to nest in my bed when I'm not home. Instead, I mumbled something about nature photography and handed over my credit card like a man buying evidence for his own emotional funeral. So there I was, parked on a quiet street 3 blocks from my own house at 7:30 on a Thursday morning, sitting in my sensible sedan with binoculars that cost more than they had any right to, feeling like the world's most pathetic private investigator. I had coffee, gas station coffee that tasted like regret and burnt dreams, and a notebook I'd grabbed from Max's school supplies that had super cool stuff, written on the cover in his handwriting. Nothing says, "I'm a grown adult handling a crisis maturely," quite like documenting your wife's potential affair in a 7-year-old's dinosaur notebook. I'd also brought what I was mentally calling the moral high ground, though honestly, it felt more like the moral medium ground at best. I mean, yes, I was investigating potential infidelity, which seemed justified, but I was also sitting in my car spying on my own house like some kind of discount detective who couldn't afford to hire an actual professional. The moral mathematics were getting complicated. Claire left for work at 8:15, right on schedule, wearing her navy blazer and carrying the travel mug I'd bought her last Christmas. She looked normal. She looked like my wife. She looked like someone who was definitely not conducting an illicit affair with her sister. But that's the thing about betrayal, isn't it? It doesn't come wearing a sign. It comes looking exactly like every other ordinary morning. 15 minutes later, Max's nanny showed up. Carla, wonderful Carla with her cheerful disposition and her ability to make Max eat vegetables without starting World War III. She waved at a neighbor, let herself in with her key, and just like that, the house became a stage set. Empty of adults, silent of secrets, waiting for the next act. I sat there for another hour, drinking terrible coffee and watching absolutely nothing happen. A mailman came by. A dog walker passed with what looked like 17 dogs tangled in leashes. I started wondering if maybe I'd completely misinterpreted Max's innocent question. Maybe Rose really did just crash in the guest room sometimes. Maybe I was losing my mind. Maybe I should just go home and apologize to my binoculars for dragging them into this mess. And then a silver sedan pulled up. A silver sedan I knew too damn well, because I'd helped Rose pick it out 2 years ago when she wanted something practical but stylish. She parked in front of my house like she belonged there, which technically she did. We'd given her a spare key for emergencies, back when emergency meant, can you water our plants, and not, can you betray every single trust we've ever given you. Rose got out of the car wearing yoga pants and an oversized sweater, looking exactly like someone stopping by for a casual visit. She checked her phone, glanced around the street. I ducked down like an idiot, even though I was 3 blocks away and she couldn't possibly see me, and then walked right up to my front door. She didn't knock. She didn't ring the doorbell. She just used that spare key and let herself into my house like she owned the place. I wrote down the time in Max's dinosaur notebook, 9:47 a.m. The handwriting looked shaky, probably because my hands were shaking, or maybe because I was writing with a pencil designed for second graders. She stayed for hours. I'm talking hours, plural, multiple, many. I watched the sun move across the sky. I listened to 3 true crime podcasts, which in retrospect was probably not the best choice for my mental state. I ate a protein bar that tasted like cardboard mixed with disappointment. I texted my assistant that I was working from home and to reschedule my afternoon calls. I sat in that car and waited like a man who'd already accepted that whatever he found wasn't going to be good news. At 2:30 in the afternoon, Rose finally emerged. And here's where my stomach really decided to make things interesting by attempting to relocate to my throat. Her hair was damp. Visibly, obviously damp, like she'd just showered. In my house. In my bathroom. Possibly, probably, in my shower. She was wearing different clothes. The yoga pants were gone, replaced by jeans I didn't recognize. The oversized sweater had become a fitted t-shirt. She looked comfortable. That's the word that kept echoing in my head. She looked comfortable in a way that suggested this wasn't her first time changing clothes in my house. In a way that suggested she kept clothes there. In a way that made me want to throw up my cardboard protein bar all over my dashboard. Rose got in her car and drove away, checking her phone one more time before pulling into traffic. I wrote down the time she left, 2:34 p.m., nearly 5 hours. She'd been in my house for nearly 5 hours while Claire was at work and Max was with his nanny. That's when I stopped being the guy who was maybe overreacting to a kid's innocent question and became the guy who knew something was very, very wrong. I went home that night and kissed Claire hello like nothing had happened. I asked about her day and listened to her complain about a difficult client. I helped Max with his homework and made dinner, spaghetti, because it's hard to screw up spaghetti even when your entire worldview is crumbling. We ate like a normal family. We watched TV like a normal family. We went to bed like a normal family. And then, while Claire slept, I started digging. Bank records first. Our joint account showed cash withdrawals I didn't remember making. 500 here, 300 there. always on days when I was traveling for work. I pulled up our phone bill and started scrolling through call logs. There they were, late-night calls between Claire and Rose, timed like clockwork whenever I was out of town, some lasting an hour or more, texts that went on for pages. I sat in my home office at 2 in the morning, surrounded by printed statements and highlighted spreadsheets, and felt like I was working on some kind of horrible school project. What I did over summer vacation, discovered my wife's affair. Little moments of betrayal adding up like coins in a jar, and suddenly the jar was so heavy I could barely lift it. I picked up those stupid binoculars, still sitting on my desk like evidence of my descent into suburban espionage, and whispered to them, "Great. Just great." I made the adult version of taking a wrong turn in a Netflix show. The kind where you're screaming at the screen for the character to just check the basement already. Except I was the character, and the basement was my entire marriage. I set the binoculars down and kept digging. Because now that I'd started, there was no going back. Turns out, becoming an amateur surveillance expert is disturbingly easy in the 21st century. Who knew? I mean, I always assumed you needed some kind of special license, or at least a trench coat, and a fedora to go full private investigator. But nope. All you need is an Amazon Prime account, a willingness to watch YouTube tutorials at midnight, and a rapidly deteriorating sense of your own dignity. I started my descent into spy tech madness on a Friday afternoon while working from home, which is corporate speak for sitting in my pajama pants researching how to catch your wife cheating without her knowing. The internet, bless its morally ambiguous heart, had plenty of options. There were cameras disguised as phone chargers, cameras hidden in pins, cameras that looked like smoke detectors, and even cameras built into those teddy bears that are supposed to help you keep an eye on your nanny, but apparently also work great for catching your spouse in acts of betrayal. I went with the smoke detector option because I'm nothing if not committed to irony. A fake smoke detector, designed to detect smoke and fire, being used to detect my life going up in flames. The universe has a twisted sense of humor, and apparently, I was the punchline. The package arrived 2 days later in discreet brown packaging that promised privacy and discretion, which are apparently code words for, "Yes, we know exactly what you're using this for, and we're not judging, but we're definitely judging a little bit." I opened it in my garage like a teenager hiding contraband from his parents, which felt appropriate given that I was essentially hiding contraband from my wife. Inside was a smoke detector that looked exactly like a smoke detector, because that's kind of the whole point. It also came with a tiny camera lens, a micro SD card that could hold more footage than I ever wanted to watch, and an instruction manual written in what I can only describe as English as a distant second language. The translation was technically accurate but spiritually confusing, with phrases like, "Insert the device into the housing unit with gentle pressure and optimal viewing trajectory." I spent an hour in the garage reading that manual like it was going to be on the SATs, watching YouTube videos from guys with usernames like SpyTechMaster2000, who all seemed way too enthusiastic about home surveillance, and generally questioning every life choice that had led me to this moment. If there's ever a book called How to Become a Detective for Dummies and Surprised Husbands Who Should Have Paid More Attention, I deserve a footnote, maybe even a whole chapter. Hell, I could write the foreword. The installation process was nerve-wracking in a way that made me miss the simple stress of quarterly reports and budget meetings. I waited until Claire took Max to his soccer practice, which she did every Saturday with the dedication of a parent who actually cares about their kid's development, making the whole situation even more confusing. And then I got to work. First camera, bedroom smoke detector. I stood on a chair in my own bedroom, unscrewing the existing smoke detector and replacing it with my spy version, feeling like the world's saddest handyman. The camera lens was tiny, barely visible even when you knew to look for it, positioned to capture a wide angle of the room. Our room. The room where we'd slept together for 8 years, where Max had crawled into bed during thunderstorms, where we'd made plans and promises, and apparently, where I'd been the only one taking those promises seriously. I tested the angle using my phone, making sure it captured the bed and the door. The live feed app was surprisingly high quality, which made me wonder what kind of world we lived in where you could get crystal clear footage of your own betrayal for less than $200. Second camera, living room bookshelf. This one I tucked behind a row of hardcover books that neither Claire nor I had read, but kept because they made us look cultured. The camera was even smaller, disguised as part of the shelf itself, angled toward the couch and the main living area. I adjusted it 3 times, checking the feed on my phone like a perfectionist framing a shot for a movie. Except this movie was a horror film, and I was both the director and the victim. I downloaded the app, set up the cloud storage, because apparently modern betrayal requires cloud computing, and tested everything multiple times. The feed was clear. The audio worked. The motion sensors activated perfectly. I had created a surveillance system that would make paranoid dictators proud, all in service of confirming what I already knew deep in my gut, but desperately hoped wasn't true. Then came the hard part, actually using it. I did what any methodical, slightly unhinged husband would do in this situation. I faked a business trip. I told Claire on Sunday night that my company needed me in Seattle for an emergency client meeting. I packed my usual suitcase, complete with the wrinkled dress shirts and the toiletry bag that always leaked shampoo. I kissed Claire goodbye on Monday morning, hugged Max tight enough to make him squirm, and drove away from my house with my heart beating so hard I thought I might need an actual cardiologist instead of just cameras and confirmation. But I didn't go to the airport. I didn't even get on the highway. Instead, I drove to a Holiday Inn Express about 20 minutes away, checked in under my own name because I wasn't trying to hide from anyone except my own family, and settled into a room that smelled like industrial cleaner and broken dreams. The room was aggressively beige walls, beige bedspread, beige carpet that had seen things it would never speak of. There was a painting of a lighthouse on the wall, which felt like someone's idea of inspirational decor, but mostly just reminded me that I was lost at sea in my own life. I set up my laptop on the desk, connected to the hotel's mediocre Wi-Fi, and opened the surveillance app with hands that shook slightly. The feed loaded. 2 camera views, bedroom and living room. Both empty. Normal. Quiet. I sat there staring at live footage of my own house like some kind of voyeuristic ghost haunting my own life. I ordered room service, a burger that cost $30 and tasted like $15, and waited. I answered work emails to maintain the illusion that I was actually in Seattle dealing with client emergencies. I watched TV with the sound off, keeping one eye on my laptop screen. I felt like a character in a thriller movie, except thrillers are supposed to be exciting, and all I felt was sick. At 7:30 that evening, my phone buzzed with a motion alert. Someone had entered the house. I clicked over to the live feed, my burger suddenly sitting in my stomach like concrete. Rose. Of course it was Rose. She let herself in with that goddamn spare key, carrying a bottle of wine like she was bringing supplies for the world's worst book club. She was wearing a dress, an actual dress, not yoga pants, and heels that clicked on our hardwood floors. Claire came down the stairs a minute later, and here's where my remaining hope decided to pack its bags and move to another country. She was also dressed up, hair done, makeup on, like she'd been preparing for a date. They greeted each other in my living room, visible on camera too. Rose handed over the wine. Claire smiled. God, she smiled in a way I hadn't seen directed at me in months. And then Rose leaned in and kissed her. Not a family peck on the cheek. Not an affectionate sister-in-law greeting. A kiss. A real, actual, romantic kiss that lasted long enough for me to count to 5 in my head while my brain tried to process what my eyes were seeing. I watched them move through my house like they owned it, like they'd redesigned the whole place to suit their secret script. They poured wine in my kitchen. They laughed at something I couldn't hear. They touched each other with the casual intimacy of people who'd done this many times before. Rose's hand on Claire's waist. Claire's fingers brushing Rose's arm. Small gestures that added up to a truth I couldn't deny anymore. I recorded everything. I saved files with timestamps and labels like evidence_10-15_1930 HRS, because when your world collapses, you want receipts. You want proof. You want documentation that says, no, you're not crazy. This actually happened. There was something oddly soothing about the methodical process of it all. Click, save, label, file. Like doing taxes, except instead of deductions, I was cataloging betrayals. And instead of a refund, I was getting a front row seat to the demolition of my marriage. They moved to the bedroom eventually, my bedroom, our bedroom, and I closed the laptop. Some things I didn't need to see in high definition. Some things I could live without witnessing in real time with crystal clear audio. I sat in that beige hotel room and laughed once. Just once. A short, bitter sound that scared me a little bit because it didn't sound like me at all. It sounded like someone else, someone harder, someone who was learning in real time that love and trust were apparently optional features in a marriage, not standard equipment. Then the laugh stopped, and the planning began. There are certain moments in life that make you feel like an adult in the worst possible way. Filing your first tax return, buying life insurance, scheduling a colonoscopy, and apparently, sitting in a sexual health clinic waiting room at 9:30 on a Tuesday morning, filling out paperwork that asks increasingly personal questions about your recent sexual activity while a television in the corner plays a cooking show about making the perfect souffle. The irony wasn't lost on me. There I was, learning about eggs and proper whisking technique, while waiting to find out if my wife had given me a sexually transmitted infection. The universe really needs to work on its timing. The clinic was one of those places that tries very hard to seem non-judgmental and welcoming, with posters about safe sex practices and pamphlets with names like "Let's Talk About STIs," featuring diverse stock photo models who looked way too happy considering the subject matter. The chairs were that wipeable plastic material that's designed to survive anything, which seemed appropriate. The fluorescent lighting was aggressive enough to make everyone look vaguely ill, which I suppose saved time on diagnosis. I'd chosen this particular clinic because it was across town from anywhere I normally went, reducing the chances of running into anyone I knew. The last thing I needed was to bump into one of Claire's yoga friends or someone from Max's school while holding a clipboard that basically announced, "Hey, I'm here to find out if my marriage gave me chlamydia." The intake nurse called my name. Well, she called Jonathan, which is what's on my insurance, but nobody actually uses except doctors' offices and my grandmother when she's disappointed in me. I followed her into a small examination room that smelled like antiseptic and awkward conversations. She was professional, probably mid-50s, with the kind of efficient demeanor that suggested she'd seen literally everything and was no longer capable of being surprised by human behavior. I appreciated that about her. No judgment, no unnecessary small talk, just straightforward questions delivered in a tone that made it clear she'd rather we both get through this as quickly as possible. "Any symptoms?" she asked, typing on a computer without looking at me. "No," I said, which was true. I felt fine. Physically, anyway. Emotionally, I was a dumpster fire, but that wasn't what she was asking about. "When was your last sexual encounter?" I had to think about that, which was depressing in its own right. "About 2 weeks ago, before I'd started my amateur surveillance career and stopped being able to look at Claire without seeing her kissing Rose in our living room." "Any reason for concern?" "Oh boy, where to start?" "I have reason to believe my partner has been unfaithful," I said, using the clinical language that made it sound less like a devastating betrayal and more like a data point in a medical chart. She nodded, still typing, completely unfazed. "We'll do a full panel. Chlamydia, gonorrhea, syphilis, HIV, hepatitis. Results take about 3 to 5 business days for most tests. HIV and hepatitis might take a week. 3 to 5 business days. I could get test results confirming my wife's affair faster than I could get a package delivered from Amazon. Modern medicine is truly miraculous." The actual testing process was quick and clinical: blood draw, urine sample, the usual invasion of privacy that comes with medical care. The nurse handed me a cup and pointed me toward a bathroom that had clearly been designed by someone who'd never had to produce a urine sample while having an existential crisis. The motivational poster on the wall said, "You've got this," which felt like aggressive cheerfulness in the face of my situation. I left the clinic 20 minutes later with a paper explaining when to expect results and a weird sense of accomplishment, like I'd just completed the world's most depressing errand. I sat in my car in the parking lot and added the appointment to my mental list of things I never imagined doing when I said I do. The list was getting concerningly long. The results came back 4 days later via a phone call that I took while sitting in my actual car. Not the hotel, not my house, but literally parked in a grocery store parking lot, because apparently that's where I received life-altering medical news now. The nurse's voice was matter-of-fact, reading results like she was reciting a grocery list. "Your HIV, hepatitis, syphilis, and gonorrhea tests all came back negative." I felt a moment of relief before she continued. "However, your chlamydia test came back positive. We'll need to prescribe antibiotics. Your partner will also need to be treated." The floor of my car seemed to drop away. I mean, I'd suspected. I'd known, realistically, that if Claire and Rose were sleeping together, there was a possibility of this. But knowing intellectually and hearing it confirmed are two very different experiences. This wasn't just footage on a screen or bank statements that suggested betrayal. This was medical proof. Clinical, undeniable, living in my body proof that my wife had not only cheated on me, but had been careless enough, or callous enough, to not even protect my health in the process. Mr. Reyes? Are you still there? Yeah, I managed. Yes, I'm here. She gave me instructions about the antibiotics, about abstaining from sexual contact, which, honestly, wasn't going to be a problem, and about informing my partners. Partners, plural, like I was out here living some kind of wild lifestyle instead of being a suburban dad who got excited about sales on lawn fertilizer. I picked up the prescription at a CVS pharmacy where the pharmacist, bless her heart, did not make eye contact while explaining I needed to take the full course even after symptoms disappeared. What symptoms? I wanted to ask. The burning rage? The crushing sense of betrayal? Will the antibiotics help with those? But that's when I decided passive observation wasn't enough anymore. I needed more than cameras and bank statements. I needed a professional. Someone who did this for a living and wouldn't have an emotional breakdown in a grocery store parking lot. His name was Marco Silva, and I found him through a lawyer buddy who'd used him for a different case. Marco's office was above a Thai restaurant in a part of town that was gentrifying but hadn't quite gotten there yet, which meant the rent was reasonable and the pad Thai smelled amazing. He was maybe 40, with dark hair going silver at the temples and the kind of weathered face that suggested he'd seen humanity at its worst and had developed a caffeine dependency to cope. There was an espresso machine in the corner of his office that looked more expensive than my laptop. So, he said, after I'd explained the situation while he took notes on an actual notepad like some kind of analog detective from a noir film, you want financial records, location tracking, pattern analysis. The full package. The full package, I confirmed. I want to know everything. Where they go, what they spend, how long this has been going on. Everything. Marco nodded, sipped his espresso, and got to work. And let me tell you, the man earned every dollar I paid him. Within a week, he'd traced patterns I'd missed. Cash withdrawals that corresponded with Rose's credit card purchases at furniture stores. Transfers I'd overlooked, small amounts, 500 here, 700 there, always to an LLC registered in the Pearl District with a name so generic it was clearly designed to avoid attention. Cascadia Properties Management. Marco pulled up property records. The LLC owned a condo. A nice condo, actually, in one of those buildings with a doorman and a rooftop garden and probably a yoga studio in the lobby because of course there was. It was registered 18 months ago. 18 months of this secret life, playing house in a different location while I worked and paid the mortgage and tucked Max into bed. Marco sent me photos, exterior shots of the building, lobby, the actual unit number. He sent me utility records showing regular payments. He sent me furniture delivery receipts and even found a Yelp review Rose had left for a nearby coffee shop, gushing about how it was the perfect spot for morning coffee before heading home, which now had an entirely different and nauseating meaning. The paper trail showed over $150,000 total. $150,000 siphoned out of various accounts over 18 months to fund their little love nest. That's not a fair money. That's building a whole separate life money. That's we planned this carefully and executed it systematically money. I sat in my rental car, because yes, I'd rented a car at this point, paranoid that Claire might track my regular vehicle, and looked at Marco's report. Pages and pages of evidence, timestamps, financial transactions, photographic proof. Everything organized with tabs and highlights like a very depressing school project. And I laughed. Just once, sharp and bitter, because somewhere between the STD diagnosis and the secret condo and the 18 months of elaborate deception, my life had become a rom-com that took a hard left turn into courtroom drama. Like if You've Got Mail merged with Kramer versus Kramer, and nobody won except the lawyers. Then the laugh died in my throat, replaced by something colder and more focused. Planning. Strategy. The systematic dismantling of the lies I'd been living in. Because if they could spend 18 months building a secret life, I could spend the next few months tearing it down. Finding a divorce lawyer when you're still technically pretending your marriage is fine is a special kind of surreal experience. It's like shopping for coffins while the person is still alive and walking around asking what you want for dinner. You can't exactly Google best divorce attorneys near me on your shared home computer without raising some red flags. So I did what any paranoid, semi-unhinged spouse would do. I used my phone in a McDonald's parking lot at 11 o'clock at night while eating stress fries and pretending my life hadn't become a country song without the catchy chorus. The reviews were fascinating in a depressing way. People pouring their hearts out in Google reviews about how attorney so-and-so really fought for me during the hardest time of my life, or couldn't have navigated my divorce without this firm. Like Yelp reviews. But instead of rating tacos, they're rating who best helped them dismantle their failed marriages. The American dream. Everybody. I settled on Elena Park after reading approximately 47 reviews and visiting 12 different law firm websites that all looked identical. Same stock photos of gavels. Same professional headshots where everyone looked trustworthy and expensive. Same promises about protecting your interests and aggressive representation. Elena's website was different though. No gavel photos. No inspirational quotes about justice. Just a clean design. Her credentials, which were impressive enough to make me feel both hopeful and poor, and a tagline that said clear strategy. No drama. That's what sold me. No drama. I'd had enough drama to last several lifetimes, and we hadn't even gotten to the actual divorce part yet. Her office was in one of those downtown buildings where the elevator makes you feel judged and the lobby has abstract art that probably costs more than my car. I signed in at the security desk, got a visitor badge that said guest, like I was attending the world's worst party, and took the elevator to the 14th floor while trying not to look at my reflection in the polished doors. I looked exactly like what I was. A man who'd been sleeping poorly and stress-eating fries in parking lots. Elena Park's office was all glass and steel and floor-to-ceiling windows with a view of the city that reminded you exactly how much her hourly rate probably was. The receptionist, an efficient-looking woman named Patricia according to her nameplate, offered me coffee or water in that tone that suggested she'd seen hundreds of people in my exact situation and had perfected the right balance of professional courtesy and emotional distance. I took the water. My hands were shaking slightly, and I didn't trust myself with hot liquids. Elena came out to greet me herself, which I appreciated. No making me wait in the lobby like some kind of power play. She was maybe 40, Korean-American, wearing a suit that looked like it had been designed specifically to make opposing counsel nervous. Her handshake was firm enough to convey competence, but not so aggressive that it felt like a threat. She had this way of looking at you that suggested she was already 3 steps ahead in a chess game you didn't know you were playing. "Mr. Reyes," she said, gesturing toward her office. "Come in." Her office was immaculate in a way that made me self-conscious about the state of my life. Everything had a place. Her desk was organized with the precision of someone who probably color-coded her closet and never lost her car keys. There were diplomas on the wall, University of Washington, Columbia Law, and a photo of her with what looked like a very happy golden retriever, which humanized her slightly. She sat behind her desk, pulled out a legal pad. Old school, I liked that, and looked at me with an expression that was professional, but not unkind. "Tell me everything," she said. "And I mean everything. Don't leave anything out because you think it's embarrassing or irrelevant. I've heard it all, and I need complete information to help you." So I told her. Everything. The whole sordid story, starting with Max's innocent question and ending with Marco's report and the chlamydia diagnosis that was both medically treatable and emotionally devastating. I showed her the surveillance footage on my laptop. She watched without flinching, taking notes the whole time. I walked her through the bank records, the LLC, the secret condo, the 18 months of systematic deception. She didn't gasp. She didn't look shocked. She didn't do any of the dramatic reactions that people do in movies when hearing about affairs and betrayal. She just listened, took notes, and occasionally asked clarifying questions like, "Do you have documentation of that?" And "What's the approximate total of misappropriated funds?" When I finished, she set down her pen and looked at me with something that might have been sympathy if sympathy could wear a business suit. "Mr. Reyes." "Jonah," I interrupted. "Please." Mr. Reyes makes me feel like I'm in trouble with my high school principal. A small smile. "Jonah, first, I want you to know that what you're feeling right now is completely normal. Betrayal of this magnitude is traumatic, and you're handling it remarkably well given the circumstances. I cried in a McDonald's parking lot last week, I admitted. That's still handling it well, she said without missing a beat. Trust me, I've had clients handle it much worse. Now let's talk strategy. She pulled up a document on her computer and turned the screen so I could see. It was a timeline, already started, with dates and events. The woman worked fast. Washington is a community property state, which means marital assets are divided equally in divorce. However, there are exceptions for cases involving financial misconduct, which you clearly have. The funds used to purchase and maintain that condo were marital assets used for an extramarital affair. That's relevant. She clicked to another document. Your evidence is solid. The surveillance footage, the financial records, the medical diagnosis, it all creates a clear pattern of deception and financial misconduct. We can use this. How? I asked, leaning forward. Several ways. First, we secure your assets. You need to protect yourself financially before filing. Open a separate bank account, just in your name, and start redirecting your income there. We'll document everything to show it's not hidden, just protected. Second, we freeze joint accounts where legally permissible to prevent further unauthorized withdrawals. Third, we gather more evidence. What you have is excellent, but more is always better. She looked at me directly. I need to ask you something, and I need an honest answer. Do you want to pursue criminal charges? Financial fraud, potential embezzlement. There are criminal implications here beyond just the divorce. The question hung in the air like smoke. Criminal charges meant police, prosecutors, potential jail time. It meant escalating this beyond a personal betrayal into a legal matter that could follow Claire and Rose for years. It meant Max would grow up knowing his mother had been arrested, not just divorced. But it also meant consequences. Real, substantial consequences for actions that deserved them. Yes, I said, and I was surprised by how steady my voice sounded. Not because I want revenge. Okay, maybe a little bit because I want revenge, but because what they did was actually criminal. They stole from me. They committed fraud. They built an entire secret life with money that was supposed to be for our family, for Max's future. That deserves more than just a divorce settlement. Elena nodded, writing something down. Good. That's the right answer, and more importantly, it's honest. Clients who lie to themselves about their motivations make my job harder. You want consequences, and you're entitled to want that. We spent the next hour going through specifics. She explained how to transfer funds legally. Transparency was key. Everything documented, nothing that could be construed as hiding assets. She recommended a forensic accountant named Sarah Lynn who specialized in divorce cases involving financial misconduct. She outlined a timeline. Secure assets now, file for divorce in approximately 3 weeks, coordinate with law enforcement regarding the criminal investigation. What about Max? I asked, because that was the question keeping me up at night beyond the betrayal and the STDs and the secret condos. Elena's expression softened slightly. Primary custody will almost certainly go to you given the circumstances. A parent engaging in an affair, especially one involving financial crimes and medical negligence, doesn't look good in family court. We'll push for supervised visitation initially, then potentially work toward a more normal custody arrangement once the criminal matters are resolved. The court's primary concern is Max's well-being. I signed a retainer agreement that made my credit card whimper but felt necessary. Elena walked me to the door, shook my hand again, and said something that stuck with me. You're not losing everything, Jonah. You're losing a marriage that was already gone. What you're doing now is protecting what matters. Your son, your future, your dignity. That's not loss. That's survival. I left her office feeling something I hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. Not the naive hope that everything would work out perfectly, but the practical hope that comes from having a plan. Elena was right. I wasn't losing everything. I was strategically salvaging what I could from the wreckage. That afternoon, I opened a new bank account at a different bank than Claire and I usually used. I set up direct deposit for my paychecks. I transferred funds from our savings, not all of it, but enough to protect myself, and documented every transaction with timestamps and notes explaining the reasoning. I felt like I was preparing for war, which I suppose I was. A legal war with paperwork instead of weapons, but war nonetheless. I met with Sarah Lynn, the forensic accountant, a woman who looked at financial statements the way art critics look at paintings. with intense focus and the ability to spot details normal people missed. She reviewed everything and promised a full report within 2 weeks. I was learning to think like someone who understood that losing didn't mean losing everything. It meant choosing what to save. Marco Silva called me on a Wednesday afternoon while I was pretending to work on a presentation about operational efficiency, which felt deeply ironic given how inefficiently I was managing my personal life. I saw his name on my phone screen and immediately stepped out of my home office. Yes, I was back to working from home because maintaining the facade of normalcy was exhausting enough without adding a commute, and answered while standing in my garage like I was about to receive instructions for a Black Ops mission. "Jonah," Marco said, and I could hear the espresso machine in the background because the man was apparently powered by caffeine and cynicism in equal measure. "I've got something interesting. Your sister-in-law, Amanda? Claire's other sister." "Yeah," I said, my brain immediately trying to figure out what Amanda had to do with any of this. Amanda was the responsible one, the one who'd married a tech guy named Derek and had 2 kids who actually behaved in restaurants. She was PDA president and ran a successful marketing consulting business from home. She had her life together in a way that made the rest of us look like we were playing adults in a community theater production. "She's got her own investigator," Marco said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "Guy named Chun. We know each other professionally. He's been following Rose too. Amanda's been suspicious for months." I had to sit down on my garage steps, right there between the recycling bins and Max's bike with the training wheels he refused to admit he still needed. "She what? Hired an investigator. About 3 months ago. Apparently, she noticed some financial irregularities with her husband's accounts. Withdrawals, transfers, the usual red flags. She thought Derek was cheating. Turns out, he wasn't. Rose was borrowing money from him, giving him some story about investment opportunities. Amanda's been trying to figure out where the money went. Oh, this was rich. This was beautifully, perfectly, karmically rich. Rose hadn't just been stealing from me. She'd been running some kind of investment scam on her own brother-in-law. The sheer audacity was almost impressive if it wasn't completely enraging. "How much?" I asked. "Chen says approximately 40,000 over the past year. Small amounts, always with promises of returns that never materialized. Derek's an engineer, smart guy, but apparently, family loyalty made him gullible." I did some quick mental math. My $150,000 for the condo plus Amanda's husband's $40,000 in fake investments meant Rose had extracted nearly $200,000 from our family. That wasn't just an affair. That was a criminal enterprise with benefits and a nice view. "Marco," I said slowly, "can you arrange a meeting? Between me and Amanda? Somewhere neutral, somewhere Claire won't see us together?" "Already texted you an address," Marco said. "Coffee shop in Bellevue. Tomorrow at 10. Amanda's already agreed. She's been wanting to talk to someone who might understand what she's dealing with." The coffee shop was one of those aggressively trendy places that served pour-over coffee and had succulents on every table like decorative hostages. I got there 15 minutes early because apparently, I'd become the kind of person who shows up early to secret meetings with in-laws to discuss family betrayals. Character development, they call it. I called it Tuesday. Amanda arrived exactly on time, wearing yoga pants and a fleece jacket that probably cost more than my car payment, looking like every other suburban mom in the greater Seattle area. But her eyes were tired in a way I recognized, the kind of tired that comes from pretending everything's fine while internally screaming. She saw me, did a double take that suggested Marco hadn't told her who she was meeting, and then walked over with the cautious expression of someone approaching a potentially rabid animal. "Jonah," she said, sitting down across from me with her oat milk latte, or whatever the hell the trendy coffee was called. "Marco said I was meeting someone who had information about Rose, but I didn't expect." "Your sister is having an affair with my wife," I said, because subtlety seemed pointless at this stage. "Has been for at least 18 months. They have a condo together bought with money stolen from our joint accounts. Also, Rose has apparently been running investment scams on Derek. So, fun family dynamics." Amanda's face went through several emotions in rapid succession: shock, confusion, denial, and then something that looked like pieces clicking into place. "Oh my God," she said quietly. "That's where the money went. That's why Derek's investments never paid out. There were no investments." "Nope," I confirmed, taking a sip of my coffee that tasted like disappointment and expensive beans. Just a love nest in the Pearl District with utility bills and furniture that we apparently funded together without knowing it. We're like accidental roommates in the worst sitcom ever written. She laughed, but it was the kind of laugh that's half hysteria and half rage. I thought Derek was cheating. I hired an investigator. I've been following Rose for months trying to figure out what she was doing with the money, and I didn't think that she was sleeping with Claire. I finished. Yeah, me neither. Not until my 7-year-old asked why Aunty Rose sleeps in my room when I travel. Kids, man. They've got terrible timing but excellent observation skills. Amanda put her head in her hands for a moment, and I gave her the space to process. I knew the feeling, that disorienting sensation of your reality rearranging itself while you're still standing in it, trying to figure out which direction is up. How much proof do you have? She asked finally, looking up with eyes that had gone from tired to sharp. I pulled out my phone and showed her. Not the actual surveillance footage, some things you don't need to see about your own sister, but the financial records Marco had compiled, the LLC documents, the property records, the timeline Sarah Lynn had created showing every withdrawal and transfer. Amanda went pale, then red, then pale again. That's, Jesus, Jonah. That's nearly $200,000 between our families. That's not an affair, that's organized crime. I prefer to think of it as fraud with romantic complications, I said. But yeah, you're not wrong. We sat there for a moment, two people who'd married into the same family, and were now discovering that family was more dysfunctional than a reality TV show, but with better production values and worse morals. I want to help, Amanda said suddenly. Whatever you're planning, whatever you're doing, I want in. Derek's too nice. He'll say it's fine, it's family, we shouldn't make waves. But I'm done protecting people who don't deserve it. And that's how I gained an unexpected ally. 2 people betrayed by Rose. Well, 3 if you counted Derek. But he wasn't there, and Amanda assured me he'd go along with whatever she decided because he was conflict-averse to the point of being useless in situations requiring actual spine. We spent the next hour comparing notes like spies exchanging intelligence. Amanda had photos of Rose meeting with various people who'd apparently also been targets of her investment schemes, a wider web than I'd realized. I had the surveillance footage and medical proof of the affair. She had Derek's financial records showing the pattern of loans that were never repaid. I had Elena's legal strategy and Marco's investigative reports. Together, we had enough to not just divorce our respective spouses, but to potentially destroy Rose's entire carefully constructed life. It should have felt vindictive. Maybe it was vindictive, but it also felt like justice. Like 2 people who'd been playing by the rules suddenly realizing the rules didn't apply to everyone and deciding to write some new ones. Elena, my lawyer, mentioned criminal charges, I said carefully. For the financial fraud. It would mean police, prosecutors, potential charges for embezzlement, wire fraud, maybe more depending on what they find. Amanda didn't hesitate. Do it. Rose has been playing the favorite child, the golden daughter, the one who can do no wrong her entire life. Mom and Dad worship her. Meanwhile, Claire and I have been trying to live up to impossible standards while Rose skates by on charm and manipulation. I'm done. Derek's done. And frankly, our kids deserve to know the truth about their aunt. We exchanged numbers, real numbers, not just the family group chat where Rose and Claire could see our conversations. We agreed to coordinate everything with our respective lawyers and investigators. We promised to keep each other updated on any developments. As we were leaving, Amanda turned to me with something that almost looked like a smile. You know what the worst part is? I actually liked Claire. I thought you guys were happy. I thought you were one of the good ones. We were happy, I said, surprised by how much it hurt to use past tense. Or at least I was. Turns out happiness is easier when you don't know you're living in a lie. Well, Amanda said, adjusting her purse that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Let's make sure they understand what it's like to live with consequences. I'm thinking we file for divorce on the same day. Really maximize the impact. I grinned, genuinely grinned, for the first time in weeks. You know what, Amanda? I think we're going to get along just fine. She smiled back, and it wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of someone who'd been pushed too far and was about to push back twice as hard. Revenge planning looks good on you, Jonah. Very therapeutic. Better than couples counseling, I agreed. We parted ways in that trendy coffee shop parking lot, 2 unlikely allies united by betrayal and a shared desire to watch certain people learn about consequences. If this was a movie, we'd probably be the villains. But from where I was standing, we were just people who'd finally stopped being victims. And honestly, that felt pretty damn good. Rose decided to host a family dinner, because apparently when you're running a multi-thousand-dollar fraud scheme and conducting an affair with your sister, the logical next step is to gather everyone together for pot roast and performative family bonding. The invitation came via the family group chat, the one that included everyone except Derek, who'd been conveniently excluded from family communications after the investment situation became awkward, with a message that was aggressively cheerful and included 3 exclamation points and a heart emoji. Family dinner at my place. Saturday at 6. Bringing my famous apple pie. Can't wait to see everyone. I stared at that message on my phone like it was written in a foreign language. The audacity. The sheer, unmitigated audacity of this woman who'd been sleeping with my wife, stealing my money, scamming her brother-in-law, and generally treating our family like her personal ATM and dating service, now inviting us over for dinner like she was Martha Stewart hosting a special episode on how to be a sociopath with good table settings. I texted Amanda privately, "Are you seeing this?" Her response came back immediately, "Oh, I'm seeing it. And we're going. Both of us." With smiles. She was right, of course. This was an opportunity. One last performance before the curtain came down and the real show began. Elena had already prepared the divorce papers. Marco had compiled his final report. Sarah Lynn had traced every dollar with the precision of someone who genuinely enjoyed spreadsheets and financial forensics. Everything was ready. We just needed to get through one more family dinner without me strangling anyone with the decorative napkins. Saturday arrived with the kind of perfect fall weather that felt personally offensive given my mood. Sunny, crisp, leaves turning colors like we were all living in a tourism commercial for the Pacific Northwest. Claire spent an hour getting ready, doing her hair and makeup with the kind of care usually reserved for job interviews or first dates. She wore a dress I'd bought her for our anniversary 2 years ago, which felt like a particularly cruel choice, though she probably didn't even remember where it came from. "You look nice," I said, because that's what husbands say, and I was still playing the role of husband even though the script had been revealed as complete fiction. "Thanks, babe," she replied, kissing my cheek with lips that had kissed Rose probably hours earlier based on the timeline Marco had been tracking. Rose always makes such an effort with these dinners. I want to look nice for her. The irony of that statement was so thick I could have spread it on toast. We picked up Max from his playdate. He'd been at a friend's house building Lego and being blissfully unaware that his family was a disaster, and drove to Rose's apartment. Not the secret condo, obviously. That would have been too on the nose. No, Rose maintained a regular apartment for appearances, a one-bedroom place that she decorated with the kind of bohemian aesthetic that screamed, "I'm spiritual and deep," while secretly screaming, "I'm funding this with your money, suckers." Amanda and Derek arrived at the same time we did, and I caught Amanda's eye across the parking lot. She gave me the hi that everyone else interpreted as sisterly affection, but I now recognized as something entirely different. I played my part too. Attentive husband. Proud father watching Max eat green beans without complaint. Interested son-in-law asking mom about her book club and her garden and pretending to care about the drama involving someone named Cheryl who'd apparently made controversial statements about hydrangeas. Derek looked miserable in the way engineers look when forced into social situations without clear protocols. He kept checking his phone under the table, probably looking at stock prices or code repositories or anything that didn't require emotional processing. We made it through the salad, some kind of arugula situation with goat cheese that Rose announced she'd picked up from that darling farmer's market, and the main course, which was actually delicious in a way that made me angrier. Like, couldn't she be bad at cooking? Did she have to be good at everything except basic human decency? The conversation was aggressively normal. We talked about Max's school. We talked about the weather. We discussed whether the Seahawks had a chance this season, which sparked a debate between Derek and me that was probably the most genuine interaction at the table. We carefully avoided talking about money, investments, travel schedules, or anything that might lead to uncomfortable questions. Then Amanda's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and I saw her face change, just for a second, just a flicker, before she schooled her expression back to neutral. She caught my eye and tilted her phone slightly, so I could see the screen. It was a photo from Marco's partner Chin, Rose and Claire, entering the Pearl District condo. Previous night. Timestamp, 9:47 p.m. They were holding hands. Amanda casually passed me her phone under the table like we were high schoolers cheating on a test. I looked at the photo while pretending to check my own messages, felt my jaw clench, and passed the phone back. We exchanged a look that contained entire conversations. Did you see that? Oh, I saw it. Last night, while we were home with our kids, while they were playing house in their secret apartment. Unbelievable. Completely believable at this point, which is somehow worse. Rose brought out dessert. The famous apple pie she'd mentioned, homemade crust, perfect lattice work, served with vanilla ice cream that was probably artisanal and locally sourced. Mom practically applauded. Claire praised Rose's baking skills like she was accepting an award on her behalf. Max ate his slice with the enthusiasm of a 7-year-old who didn't understand subtext. We endured more small talk. Climate change somehow came up, because apparently we couldn't just stick to safe topics like sports and weather without veering into whether the planet was dying, which felt appropriate given that my marriage was definitely dying and we were all pretending not to notice. Amanda excused herself to the bathroom and texted me. Elena tomorrow at 9. Marco at 10. We file Monday. I texted back. Coordinating the simultaneous strike? Like D-Day but with lawyers instead of soldiers. I almost laughed out loud, but turned it into a cough that made Claire ask if I was okay. Fine, I said. Pie went down wrong. Rose looked concerned in that performative way people do when they're pretending to care. Oh no, do you need water? I'm good, I said, thinking about all the things I actually needed that water couldn't provide. Like honesty. Or a wife who wasn't sleeping with her sister. Or $200,000 back. We made it through coffee. Fancy pour-over stuff that Rose made with the kind of precision usually reserved for chemistry experiments. And finally, mercifully, the evening began winding down. Mom declared it absolutely lovely and hugged Rose like she'd just cured cancer instead of just making pot roast. Claire helped with dishes while Rose packed leftovers, the two of them in the kitchen looking like a couple playing house, which I guess they were. Amanda and I hung back by the door, helping Max with his shoes while Derek brought the car around because he'd been waiting for an excuse to escape for the past 3 hours. Monday, Amanda whispered, pretending to adjust her son's jacket. We ruin everything. Monday, I confirmed, feeling something cold and determined settle in my chest. Simultaneous filings. Maximum impact. She smiled. Not a nice smile, not a family gathering smile, but the smile of someone who'd been wronged and was about to make it everyone's problem. This is going to be therapeutic. Better than actual therapy, I agreed. We said our goodbyes with hugs and promises to do this again soon, everyone playing their parts one last time. Claire buckled Max into his car seat while chatting with Rose about maybe getting together for lunch next week, completely unaware that by next week, lawyers would be involved and everything would be on fire. I drove home with my wife beside me, my son asleep in the back, and my phone full of evidence that would destroy the pleasant fiction we'd all been living in. The dinner had been a trap, not for them, but for me, one last test of whether I could maintain the facade. I'd passed. Barely. But Monday was coming, and with it, the reckoning they'd earned. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp clarity that makes you think the universe might actually have a sense of dramatic timing. I woke up at 5:30. Not because my alarm went off, but because my body had apparently decided that sleep was for people who weren't about to detonate their entire lives, and lay there staring at my ceiling like it might offer some last-minute wisdom or at least a sign that I was doing the right thing. The ceiling, unhelpfully, remained silent. Elena had scheduled the filing for 9 a.m. sharp. Amanda's lawyer, a guy named Richard Chun, no relation to her investigator, apparently there are just multiple Chins in the legal profession, was filing at the same time in a different courthouse. We'd coordinated this like a military operation, which felt both ridiculous and entirely necessary. 2 divorces, 2 different judges, same family, same disaster, filed within minutes of each other to maximize what Elena had called strategic impact and what I mentally referred to as making sure they can't warn each other and coordinate their lies. I got Max ready for school with the kind of careful attention that comes from knowing this might be the last normal morning for a while. Pancakes, his favorite, with chocolate chips arranged in a smiley face because I'm not a monster. Orange juice. His dinosaur backpack with the homework I'd checked 3 times because overcompensating for your failing marriage through excellent parenting is apparently my coping mechanism. Dad, why are you being weird? Max asked, syrup on his chin, looking at me with those perceptive kid eyes that see way too much. Not weird, buddy. Just making sure you have a good day. I wiped his face with a napkin that had cartoon characters on it, purchased specifically because regular napkins apparently weren't good enough for my crisis-era parenting. Claire came downstairs looking professional and put together, ready for her day at the marketing firm where she worked and presumably didn't spend her time planning secret lives with her sister. She poured coffee into her travel mug. The same one she'd been using for years, worn and familiar, a relic from back when I thought I knew my own wife. Big day? She asked, and I almost laughed because, lady, you have no idea. Meeting with a potential client. I lied smoothly, which was technically true if you considered my lawyer a client in the transaction of dismantling my marriage. Might run long. I'll text you. She kissed my cheek. Automatic, routine, meaningless, and headed out the door. I watched her drive away and felt nothing except a weird sense of relief that the pretending was almost over. I dropped Max at school, hugged him maybe a little too long, and watched him run toward his classroom with his backpack bouncing and his shoes that lit up with every step. 2nd grade. He was in 2nd grade, and his world was about to get complicated in ways he couldn't possibly understand yet. The guilt sat in my stomach like a rock, heavy and uncomfortable, but I reminded myself, I wasn't the one who'd chosen this. I was just the one dealing with it. Elena's office at 8:45. I was early because showing up on time felt like tempting fate. She was already there, looking like she'd been awake for hours, wearing another one of those suits that screamed, I will destroy you professionally, and you'll thank me for it. Her desk had multiple folders organized with color-coded tabs, because apparently even revenge requires good filing systems. Ready? She asked, and I appreciated that she didn't try to make small talk or ask how I was feeling. We both knew how I was feeling. As ready as I'm going to be, I said. We filed electronically at 9 a.m. exactly. Elena clicked a few buttons, typed in some codes, and just like that, my marriage was officially over. Well, officially in the process of being over. There would be hearings and negotiations and all the bureaucratic poetry of divorce, but the first domino had fallen. Elena pulled up her phone. Amanda's lawyer filed 2 minutes ago. Papers are being served now. The process servers, because yes, we'd hired actual process servers like this was a legal drama on cable TV, were delivering divorce papers to Claire at her office and Rose at her apartment simultaneously. Coordinated strikes. Maximum chaos. If you're going to blow up your life, might as well do it with style and precision. My phone rang at 9:17. Claire. I looked at Elena, who nodded, so I answered and put it on speaker. Jonah, what the hell? Claire's voice was so loud that Elena's assistant probably heard it through the closed door. I just got served with divorce papers at my office, in front of my co-workers. What the hell is happening? I'd rehearsed this. Elena and I had practiced. Calm, factual, immovable. Like reading from a script I'd written myself after weeks of evidence gathering and midnight anxiety spirals. I'm filing for divorce, Claire. You've been having an affair with your sister for at least 18 months. You've stolen approximately $150,000 from our joint accounts to fund a secret condo. You gave me chlamydia, and I have documentation of all of it, including video footage, financial records, and a medical diagnosis. My lawyer has everything. I'd suggest you get a good attorney. Silence. The kind of silence that suggests someone's brain is trying to process information that doesn't compute with their carefully constructed reality. You can't. Jonah, we need to talk about this. No, actually we don't. We need to talk through our lawyers. Elena Park is representing me. Have your attorney contact her. Don't contact me directly except regarding Max's immediate needs. I hung up. My hands were shaking, but in a good way. In an I just did something terrifying and necessary way. Elena gave me an approving nod that felt like a gold star from a teacher who'd seen students fail this test many times. Well done, she said. Factual, firm, no emotional escalation. Perfect. My phone started buzzing immediately. Text from Claire, increasingly frantic. I turned it face down on Elena's desk. She'll try to negotiate, Elena said, already typing notes into her laptop. They always do. She'll want to explain, to fix it, to convince you that whatever you think you know is wrong. Don't engage. Let her panic spiral. It works in our favor. Amanda texted the group chat we'd created, just me, her, Elena, and her lawyer Richard. Rose called crying. Mom called screaming. Derek is hiding in his office. This is going exactly as planned. Fire. I sent back a thumbs up emoji because apparently I'd reached the point in my emotional journey where destroying my marriage via coordinated legal strikes warranted emoji communication. The real fun started when the lawyers moved fast. Elena had been preparing for weeks, and she deployed her strategy like a general who'd been planning this battle since the beginning. She filed motions for emergency financial orders. She submitted all the evidence: Marco's surveillance, Sarah Lynn's forensic accounting report, the medical records, the LLC documents, everything organized and labeled and devastating. Sarah Lynn's full report was a masterpiece of financial investigation. She'd traced every dollar. The $150,000 I'd found was actually just the beginning. There were credit cards I didn't know about, opened in both our names. There were business expenses that funded romantic getaways. There were transfers to offshore accounts that Rose had set up, probably thinking she was being clever with asset protection, but really just committing additional fraud. The total came to just over $180,000 when you included everything. $180,000. That was a down payment on a house. That was Max's college fund, and then some. That was years of work and saving and planning, siphoned away to fund an affair and a secret life. Elena didn't just negotiate. She went for blood. Full restitution. Primary custody. Supervised visitation until the criminal investigation concluded. She filed referrals with the State Attorney General's office for financial fraud. She contacted the SEC because some of Rose's investment schemes had crossed into securities fraud territory. My phone kept buzzing. Claire called 17 times. Rose called 6. Claire's mother called 8 times, and I could see from the voicemail timestamps that each message was probably longer and angrier than the last. I didn't listen to any of them. Elena had instructed me to save everything but engage with nothing, so I did what I was told like a good client who'd paid a retainer large enough to make my accountant weep. By Tuesday afternoon, the media had somehow gotten wind of it. Not major media. We weren't famous or anything. But the local business journal ran a piece about venture capital families and financial fraud investigations that didn't name names, but included enough details that anyone who knew us would recognize the story. Someone at Claire's office must have talked, or maybe it was someone from the courthouse. Or maybe it was just that disasters have a way of becoming public entertainment whether you want them to or not. Claire and Rose panicked. You could see it in their response. They hired lawyers, expensive ones, the kind that charge by the 6-minute increment and have offices in buildings with names like Financial District Tower or Metropolitan Plaza. They released a joint statement through their attorneys calling the accusations baseless and emotionally motivated, which was lawyer speak for, "Oh shit, we're caught. And we're going to try the denial strategy." But the evidence didn't care about their denials. The surveillance footage didn't care. The bank records didn't care. The medical diagnosis definitely didn't care. Facts have this annoying habit of being true regardless of how much you'd prefer they weren't. Amanda texted me updates throughout the week. Derek changed all the passwords. Rose is losing it. And later, Mom showed up at my house. I showed her the receipts. She left crying. And then, Richard says Rose's lawyer is trying to negotiate. LOL no. Elena filed more motions. The forensic accountant provided testimony. The judge ordered asset freezes on accounts linked to the LLC. The condo, their precious secret love nest, was put under court supervision pending the divorce settlements. Every piece of furniture they'd bought, every expensive appliance, every romantic decoration was cataloged like evidence in a crime scene, which I suppose it was. I should have felt vindicated. Maybe I did. Somewhere under the exhaustion and the stress and the constant buzzing of my phone with messages I refused to read. But mostly I felt tired. Winning has a lot of admin work, as it turns out. Revenge requires organization and follow-through in responding to your lawyer's emails within 24 hours. The world we'd built, their comfortable life, the nice dinners, the family gatherings, the polished reputations, cracked and then shattered. Claire's friends stopped calling her. Rose's yoga studio quietly asked her to step back from teaching. The invitations to family events dried up once everyone realized the golden child had been running a criminal enterprise disguised as sisterly affection. I sat in Elena's office on Friday afternoon, reviewing documents and signing forms, and felt something that might have been satisfaction if satisfaction didn't require so much paperwork. "They're offering a settlement," Elena said, sliding another folder across her desk. "Full restitution, primary custody to you, supervised visitation, admission of fault. They want to avoid the criminal trial." I looked at the number. Every dollar accounted for, plus interest, plus my legal fees. "Counter with double the legal fees," I said. "They can pay for their consequences." Elena smiled. "Now you're thinking like someone who understands leverage." Amanda and I decided that if we were going to tell Mom, capital M Mom, because that's how Claire and Rose always referred to their mother, like she deserved title capitalization, we should do it together. United front. Two wronged parties with matching folders of evidence and a shared sense of this is going to be horrible but necessary. Like getting a root canal, but for family relationships. We coordinated the ambush, because let's be honest, that's what it was, for a Saturday afternoon. Mom lived in a craftsman-style house in one of those neighborhoods where people still had landlines and thought HOA meetings were social events. The kind of place where everyone knew everyone and gossip spread faster than Wi-Fi, which meant by the time we arrived, she'd probably already heard 17 different versions of what was happening, none of them accurate, and all of them somehow worse than the truth. Amanda pulled up first in her sensible Subaru that screamed, "Responsible parent who recycles and votes in local elections." I arrived 2 minutes later in my sedan that screamed, "Guy having a midlife crisis, but in the most boring way possible." We met on the sidewalk and exchanged the kind of look that soldiers probably exchange before going into battle. Acknowledgement of shared trauma and the understanding that we were about to make someone very upset. "Ready?" Amanda asked, clutching her folder of evidence like it was a shield. "Absolutely not," I said. "Let's do this anyway." Mom answered the door wearing an apron that said, "World's Best Grandma," and had flour on her hands, because apparently, she'd decided to stress bake while her family imploded around her. The house smelled like cookies, which felt deeply unfair. Bad news should not be delivered in locations that smell like chocolate chip comfort. "Jonah." "Amanda." What a surprise. She was using her cheerful voice, the one that suggested everything was fine and we were definitely not there to destroy her. Understanding of her favorite daughter. "I was just making cookies for Rose. She's been so stressed lately, poor thing." Amanda and I exchanged a look that contained volumes of unsaid commentary about who exactly deserved cookies and stress sympathy in this situation. "Mom, we need to talk," Amanda said, moving past her into the living room before she could protest. "And you should probably sit down." The living room was a shrine to family perfection. Photos everywhere, Claire and Rose as kids, high school graduations, weddings, grandkids. Rose featured prominently, always centered, always smiling, the golden child immortalized in matching frames from Target. There was even a photo from that dinner last week, the trap dinner with the apple pie, everyone smiling like we weren't all lying to each other. Those photos felt like silent jurors watching us, and I kind of wanted to turn them all face down. Mom sat in her favorite chair, a recliner that had probably existed since the Carter administration, and looked between Amanda and me with growing concern. "What's this about? Is everyone okay? Are the kids okay?" "The kids are fine," I said, taking a seat on the couch that was too soft and probably absorbed decades of family secrets. "But we need to show you something. About Rose and Claire. I'll give Mom credit. She held it together while we went through the evidence." Amanda spread documents on the coffee table like we were presenting a case at trial. Bank statements, property records, surveillance photos, tastefully cropped to avoid actual infidelity footage because some images you can't unsee and shouldn't inflict on mothers. Marco's timeline. Sarah Lynn's forensic accounting report. The LLC documents with both their names. Her face went through a journey. Confusion first. I don't understand. What am I looking at? Then disbelief. No, there must be some mistake. Then denial. Rose wouldn't do this. You must have misunderstood. And finally, slowly, horribly, acceptance. The kind that settles over you like cold water when you realize the person you thought you knew was actually someone else entirely. $180,000, Amanda said quietly. pointing to Sarah's summary page. Plus another $40,000 from Derek through fake investment schemes. That's over $200,000 stolen from this family, Mom, by your daughter and your other daughter working together. But they're sisters, Mom said weakly, like that somehow made it better instead of infinitely worse. They've always been close. Yeah, turns out they were a little too close, I said, and Amanda shot me a look that suggested maybe sarcasm wasn't appropriate right now. But honestly, when was sarcasm ever truly appropriate? They've been having an affair for at least 18 months. They bought a condo together, with our money, while Claire was married to me and pretending everything was normal. Mom's face crumpled. Not dramatically. She wasn't the type for TH.